For as long as anyone could remember, a massive stone sat in the middle of Tom's farm. It was dark gray, rough, and tall enough to reach his chest. His father used to say the stone was there before the land had a name. Neighbors joked about it, and kids climbed on it during summer afternoons. To Tom it was just part of the field, like the fence or the old oak tree. Tom was a quiet man who lived a simple life. He woke before sunrise, fed the animals, and worked the soil until his back ached. The stone always watched him in silence. Plows had to curve around it, and crops never grew near its base. It felt stubborn, like it refused to move or be ignored. One dry autumn morning Tom noticed something strange. The ground around the stone had sunk slightly after days of heavy wind. A thin crack showed at the base where soil had pulled away. Tom knelt down and brushed the dirt with his hand. Cold air rushed out from the narrow gap. That made him pause. Stones did not breathe. He pressed his ear close and heard a faint hollow echo. It was not deep, but it was clear. This stone was not resting on solid ground. Tom tried to push it, but it did not move. He fetched a shovel and dug carefully around one edge. The soil came loose faster than he expected. With every scoop the gap grew wider. What he uncovered did not look like normal earth. There were flat stones laid side by side beneath the giant rock. They were shaped and placed with care. Tom's heart beat faster. This was not an accident of nature. Someone had built something here long ago. As the sun climbed higher, Tom stood still, staring at the opening. The farm felt different now, quiet in a heavy way. The stone that had meant nothing for years suddenly felt like a guard. Whatever lay beneath had been hidden on purpose. Tom knew one thing for sure. That stone was not just a stone anymore. And moving it would change everything. Tom did not sleep much that night. The image of the flat stones beneath the giant rock stayed in his mind. Every time the wind moved outside his window, he felt like the farm was watching him. By sunrise, he was already awake, standing at the edge of the field with a cup of warm tea in his hands. He walked slowly toward the stone. Morning light made it look even older. The crack he had opened was still there. Cool air continued to flow from beneath. Tom felt a mix of fear and curiosity. He had lived on this land his whole life, yet now it felt like he was standing on someone else's secret. Tom remembered stories his father used to tell. Long ago, travelers passed through this area. Some stayed for a while. Some left in a hurry. There were rumors about hidden places and forgotten shelters, but no one ever took them seriously. Back then the land was wide and empty, and people hid things when times were uncertain. Tom decided he could not do this alone. He walked to the edge of the farm where his neighbor Sam lived. Sam was older and had seen many seasons. When Tom told him about the stone and the hollow space beneath it, Sam's face changed. He did not laugh. He did not joke. Sam said he remembered his own father warning him about certain fields. He said some land held old work, old fear, old hope. He said some things were buried to protect them, not to lose them. Together they returned to the stone. Sam bent down and touched the flat stones with his fingers. He nodded slowly. These were placed by hand, he said. This was done carefully. That means whatever is below mattered to someone. They brought tools. Not machines, just shovels and wooden supports. They worked patiently, removing soil from one side. It took hours. Sweat ran down their backs. The stone did not shift, but the opening grew wider. By midday they uncovered a narrow stone stair leading downward. The steps were worn smooth by time. Darkness waited below. The air smelled dry and old, like paper and dust. Tom felt his heart pound. He had never been afraid of hard work or storms. But this felt different. This felt like stepping into another life. Sam suggested waiting, calling someone official. But Tom shook his head. This was on his land. His family land. He needed to see it first. They lit a lantern and Tom went down carefully. The stairs led to a small chamber built from stone blocks. The walls were strong, the ceiling low, but everything was still standing. Along one wall were wooden crates, broken with age. Inside were old tools maps and cloth-wrapped bundles. Nothing shiny, nothing dangerous, just things someone had saved. In the corner stood a metal box, heavy and sealed. Tom knelt beside it. His hands trembled as he opened the lid. Inside were letters, carefully stacked, each one written by hand. The paper yellow but the words clear. The letters spoke of a family who lived here decades ago. They wrote about hard seasons and moving on. They wrote about leaving in a hurry. They hid their memories hoping one day someone kind would find them. Tom felt his throat tighten. These were not treasures of money. They were treasures of life. Stories of people who laughed, worked, and dreamed on the same soil. Sam stood quietly behind him. Neither man spoke for a long time. The farm no longer felt empty. It felt full. As the sun began to fall, Tom knew this discovery carried responsibility. The stone was not meant to hide wealth. It was meant to protect history. And now that history had chosen to rise again, Tom carried the letters up into the daylight with careful hands. The sun touched the old paper and made it glow softly. He sat on the grass beside the stone and began to read slowly. Each letter felt heavy with meaning. The first letters spoke of a man named Ben. He had worked this land with his wife and 2 young children. They had built a small life here, planting crops and raising animals. The words were simple and honest. Ben wrote about long days, tired hands, and quiet joy. As Tom read further, the tone of the letters changed. Times became harder. The weather turned against the crops. Money grew tight. Ben wrote about worry that kept him awake at night. He wrote about protecting his family above all else. One letter explained the stone. Ben said he and others built the chamber together. They used it as a safe place. A place to hide tools, food, and memories when trouble passed through. The stone was placed last. Heavy enough to stay. Strong enough to guard. Tom paused and looked at the field around him. This land had seen fear long before his time. Yet it had survived. Just like the people who once lived here. Another letter spoke about leaving. Ben wrote that they had to move fast. There was no time to take everything. So they chose to hide what mattered. Not gold. Not wealth. But proof they existed. Proof they lived with care. Tom felt a strange connection. He had worked this same soil. Walked the same ground. Never knowing the lives layered beneath his feet. Sam sat nearby listening as Tom read aloud. The wind moved gently through the grass. It felt like the land itself was listening too. As they read on, they found a final letter. It was written with steady, calm words. Ben said if someone found this place, they should know the stone was never meant to trap the past. It was meant to protect it until the right time. Tom folded the letter and held it against his chest. He felt a deep sense of duty. This story was not his alone. It belonged to the land, to the people who worked it before, and to those who would come after. That evening Tom could not stop thinking. He walked through his farmhouse, touching the walls, looking at old family photos. He wondered what he would leave behind, what story his life would tell. The next day, people began to notice activity on the farm. Neighbors saw the open ground. They asked questions. Tom did not hide the truth. He told them everything. Word spread quickly. Not with excitement, but with respect. People came quietly. They stood near the stone. They listened. Some remembered stories from their grandparents. Others felt moved without knowing why. The farm became a place of shared memory. A place where the past felt close. Tom decided the chamber should not be closed again. But it should be protected. He cleaned the space carefully. He placed the letters in clear covers. He made the steps safer. At night Tom stood beside the stone once more. It no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a promise. The land trusted him now. And Tom knew this discovery would change how he lived. He was no longer just a farmer. He was a keeper of stories. The farm changed slowly but clearly after the discovery. People came not out of curiosity alone, but with care. They walked the field quietly and spoke in low voices. Children listened to their elders tell stories they had almost forgotten. Tom watched it all with a steady heart. He still woke before sunrise and did his work. But now each task felt connected to something larger. Every fence post and every row of soil felt like part of a long line of effort. He decided to build a small shelter near the stone. Nothing big. Just wood and glass to keep rain away. Inside he placed copies of the letters. The originals stayed safe. Visitors could read and understand without touching the fragile past. Sam helped every day. He said the farm felt alive again. Not just growing crops but growing meaning. They laughed sometimes remembering how the stone had been ignored for years. Soon a local teacher asked if students could visit. Tom agreed. He stood back as young people read the letters. Some asked questions. Some stayed silent. A few wiped their eyes without knowing why. The letters did something powerful. They made history feel human. Not distant. Not grand. Just real lives making hard choices. Tom added a board where visitors could write messages, thoughts, thanks, memories of their own families. The board filled quickly. It became clear that the hidden chamber had opened more than stone. It had opened hearts. One evening Tom found a note left behind. It was from a woman named Anna. She wrote that her great-grandfather once lived near this land. She believed he might have helped build the chamber. She thanked Tom for bringing the past into the light. Tom sat on the porch holding the note. The sky turned soft with evening color. He felt proud but also careful. He knew this place needed respect, not attention. He turned down offers to turn the farm into something loud. He did not want signs everywhere. He wanted quiet understanding. A place where people could slow down. As weeks passed, Tom noticed something else. The crops near the stone began to grow better. The soil felt richer. As if being uncovered had allowed the land to breathe. Neighbors began helping each other more. Sharing tools. Sharing time. The farm had become a reminder of working together. Just like the people who built the chamber long ago. Tom placed a simple marker near the stone. It said that this land held many stories, and that caring for the future meant honoring the past. At night Tom sometimes dreamed of Ben. Not as a ghost, but as a man working beside him. Quiet and steady, both focused on the same ground. Tom woke from those dreams feeling calm. He felt guided, not haunted. As if the land itself approved of what he was doing. One afternoon Sam asked Tom if he ever wished he had never dug. Tom looked at the stone and smiled gently. He said the stone waited because the time was right. He said some things only rise when someone is ready to carry them. The farm was no longer just his. It belonged to everyone who cared. Everyone who listened. Everyone who understood that simple lives still mattered. Tom knew one last thing remained. The chamber held more than letters. It held a lesson about leaving something meaningful behind. And that lesson would soon ask Tom a question of his own. Winter came slow and quiet, and the farm looked different under pale light. The field around the stone stayed clean and cared for, and the small shelter stood firm against cold wind. Tom still worked every day, but his mind was not only on the animals and the soil. He kept thinking about the final letter and the simple promise inside it. Ben had hidden proof of a life because he believed someone in the future would be kind enough to find it. Tom understood that kind of hope now. He realized the chamber had not only changed the farm. It had changed him. He felt more patient with people, more careful with words, more willing to listen. It was as if the land had taught him to slow down and notice what mattered. One morning Tom found Sam waiting near the shelter. Sam held a folded newspaper in his hand and looked uneasy. A developer from the nearest town had been buying land nearby. The paper said the company planned to build warehouses and wide roads. Tom did not like the sound of it, but he tried to stay calm. He had seen change before. Still, this felt personal now. A few days later, a man named Mark came to the farmhouse. Mark wore clean boots and a bright smile. He spoke politely and said he admired the farm. He said the stone site had become known in the area and people were talking about it. Then he offered Tom a deal. A large amount of money for the land. More money than Tom had ever imagined. Tom listened without interrupting. He felt his stomach tighten as Mark spoke about progress. Mark said the town needed jobs. He said the farm could become something bigger. He said Tom could buy a smaller place somewhere else and rest. When Mark left, Tom stood alone in the kitchen. The house felt quiet. The offer was tempting in a simple way. Money meant comfort and safety. It meant fewer worries during hard seasons. But Tom also knew what would happen if the land was sold. The stone would become a display or a problem. The chamber could be damaged. The quiet respect that people felt could disappear. That night Tom walked to the shelter with a lantern. He sat on the bench and looked at the copies of the letters. He imagined Ben writing by low light with his family asleep nearby. He imagined the decision to hide their story under a stone. Not to fool anyone. Not to create mystery. But to protect something gentle. Tom thought about his own life. He had no big fame. No grand plans. Just work and routine. Yet now he held something that connected many people. A piece of truth that made others feel less alone. He went down into the chamber and stood in the still air. The stone walls felt solid and patient. Tom ran his fingers along a crate edge and listened to the quiet. Then he understood the real question. It was not about money. It was about what he wanted to leave behind. The next day Tom asked Sam to come over. They sat at the kitchen table with tea between them. Tom told Sam about the offer. Sam did not look shocked. He looked sad. He said money came and went, but land with meaning was rare. He said Tom did not have to carry it alone. So Tom began talking to people. Not with a loud announcement. Just one person at a time. The teacher. A few neighbors. Anna, who had left the note. A librarian from town. A farmer who had known Tom's father. They gathered on a cold afternoon near the stone and listened. Tom explained what he feared. If he sold the land, the story might be lost again. Not hidden gently, but erased. He said he wanted the farm to stay a working farm, but also a protected place. A place where people could learn and feel connected. Anna stepped forward and said she could help. She knew people in local history groups. The teacher said the school could support the place with visits and care. The librarian offered to archive copies of the letters for safety. The farmer said he would volunteer time whenever needed. Slowly the group turned into something real. They decided to form a small community trust. A simple agreement to protect the stone and the chamber. Not to make it fancy. Not to make it loud. Just to keep it safe. Tom would still farm the land. But the protected area around the stone would belong to the trust. It could not be sold without the group agreeing. It could not be built over. It could not be forgotten again. When Mark returned with paperwork and another smile, Tom met him outside. The wind was sharp and the sky was clear. Tom thanked Mark for the offer but said no. Mark tried again. He raised the number. He spoke faster. Tom stayed calm. He said the land was not just land. He said it held a story that mattered. He said some things were worth more than money because they helped people remember who they were. Mark left with a tight face. Tom watched the car disappear down the road. For a moment Tom felt fear. He wondered if he had made a mistake. Then he looked toward the stone. The shelter stood steady. A few birds moved through the bare branches of the old oak tree. The farm felt quiet in a good way. Weeks passed and winter softened into early spring. The trust paperwork became official. People came to help with small tasks. Fixing the path. Cleaning the shelter. Planting a strip of wildflowers around the protected area. Children painted signs with simple messages about care and respect. Tom did not like attention, but he liked what the place had become. Not a tourist stop. Not a business. A living reminder. A quiet corner where the past could speak without shouting. One evening Tom sat at his table and began writing. He wrote his own letter. Not because he planned to leave soon, but because he had learned that life moved fast and seasons did not wait. He wrote about the day he felt cold air under the stone. He wrote about Ben letters. He wrote about the community that formed around a simple discovery. He wrote about choosing meaning over easy comfort. He placed his letter in a clean envelope and sealed it. Then he walked to the shelter with the last light of day. He went down into the chamber and chose a dry corner. He placed the envelope inside a small metal box and closed it carefully. When he climbed back up he stood beside the stone and breathed in the cool air. The farm was still a farm. There were still bills and chores and tired evenings. But now there was also something steady beneath it all. The huge stone had stood on his farm for years. For decades it had hidden what someone once needed to protect. Now it guarded something new. A shared promise. That lives would not be erased. That simple people still mattered. That the land would remember. And as Tom walked back toward his house, he felt a calm he had never known before. Not because everything was perfect, but because he had chosen what to carry forward and what to keep safe.